Hello, Adam, MidPointe Library's Digital and Special Collections Archivist here. Today, I will be talking about the history of various Middletown churches and religious organizations. Since Middletown is home to many historic churches and religious groups, I'm unable to cover them all in just one video. So, keep an eye out for future videos covering more churches. Also, for more in-depth history about these churches and many others, check out MidPointe Middletown's Ohio Room, specifically the Ohio Room vertical file, which contains many detailed histories about these churches and more. We begin with the First United Methodist Church, not because it is presently located across the street from the library, but because First United traces its origins back to roughly 1805, making it one of the oldest congregations in Middletown. What is now known as the First United Methodist Church began with the Methodist preachings and services of Reverend James Grimes in the Middletown area between 1805 and 1808. Reverend Grimes is said to have held services in his home and barn. By 1815, Methodists of the area were meeting in Middletown's North School. In 1829, the Methodists built their first permanent church, which was located on the south side of 2nd Street, present-day Manchester Avenue. On January 20, 1815, the congregation dedicated a larger two-story brick church located on the west side of Broadway, present-day Broad Street. The north wall of that church still stands as a part of 20 North Broad Street. The congregation then became known as the Methodist Episcopal Church. On March 1, 1890, ground was broken for a new church, which was finished and dedicated on May 3, 1891. Located at 120 South Broad Street, the congregation is still using this church. With the new church and location, the name changed again, this time to Broadway Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1937, preceding the merger of the National Methodist Episcopal Church, the National Methodist Episcopal South Church, and the National Methodist Protestant Churches, which formed the singular National Methodist Church in 1839, the local church changed its name to First Methodist Church. Finally, in 1968, the National Methodist Church and the United Brethren Church merged to form the National United Methodist Church, which led to one final name change to the First United Methodist Church. The 120 South Broad Street Church is known for its stained glass windows and for being the first stone church built in Middletown. Next, we have the First Baptist Church of Middletown. The First Baptist Church originally organized in 1808, specifically on August 9th, as the Salem Church. James Denise was appointed deacon, and the congregation met in various private homes, schoolhouses, and shops. In 1832, a permanent church was constructed on Main Street. This church was then replaced in 1854 with another on Main Street, located at what would eventually become 105 North Main Street, which is not what its address would have been at the time. In 1906, the congregation moved again, building a new church at 119 South Main Street, aided by a large donation from Paul J. Sorg. The church at 105 North Main Street became home to the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks, Lodge number 257, before being torn down in the 2000s. In 1972, the First Baptist Church moved yet again, this time to 4500 Riverview Avenue, where they currently reside. In 2008, the First Baptist Church celebrated its bicentennial. Next up is the Second Baptist Church, which is believed to be the oldest Black Baptist church in Butler County. The Second Baptist Church traces its origins to 1872, when 12 members met at the home of Amos Henry, located on the corner of 1st Street, present-day Columbia Avenue, and Broad Street. Most of the original members had been part of the First Baptist Church, but were granted dismission to form their own congregation. In 1875, the congregation moved into a newly constructed church located at 212 4th Street, which would have been on the corner of present-day 1st Avenue and South Broad Street. In 1922, the address of that church became 1104 1st Avenue when the streets and addresses changed. The land for the church was donated by Amos Henry. In 1935, construction of a new church located at 116 South Verdi Parkway began. the congregation moved out of the 1104 First Avenue Church and held services in the basement of the new church for 21 years as it was being constructed. In 1955, construction of the church was completed with the addition of the sanctuary. In 2012, the church celebrated its 140th anniversary. The temple Beth Sholom originally began as a Nashi Shalom Yehuda congregation in 1918, representing Middletown's Orthodox Jews. Prior to the organization of the congregation, the various Jewish families of Middletown, which had grown exponentially in number from 6 or so families around the turn of the century, had traditionally traveled either to Dayton or Cincinnati for services. From 1918 to 1920, the congregation met at various rented spaces for weekly services. Then, in 1920, 415 4th Street was purchased, soon to be 1410 First Avenue, after the streets changed names. The congregation met at 1410 First Avenue until 1956, when it moved to the newly constructed temple located at 610 Gladius Drive. The 1410 First Avenue property was deeded to the Middletown Board of Education after the congregation left. In 1940, the congregation rechartered itself as the Temple Beth Shalom. The Temple Beth Shalom still meets at 610 Gladius Drive. The Holy Family Parish is a Catholic parish that was established in 1991 and was the result of a merger of the former parishes of Holy Trinity, St. John, and St. Mary. Each former parish has its own rich history that I'm going to sort of breeze over for the sake of brevity, and hopefully we'll cover it in full in another video. This is a good time to point out again that if you'd like more information about the churches of the Holy Family Parish or any other church, check out MidPointe, Middletown's Ohio Room, and the Ohio Room Vertical File. Contents of the vertical file are discoverable through the library catalog. Just keep an eye out for material marked as archival. Of the 3 parishes that now make up Holy Family, Holy Trinity and the Holy Trinity Church are the oldest. Holy Trinity was founded in 1852. This congregation was primarily founded by Irish immigrants. The Holy Family Church lasted until 1898, when it was raised and the current church was built in its place. The St. John Parish and the church followed the Holy Trinity in 1872 and was founded primarily to serve the growing German Catholic immigrants of Middletown. On March 16, 1925, ground broke on the St. John Church that still stands today, though the church wasn't officially dedicated until July 31, 1927. A part of the Miami Valley Presbyterian, the first Presbyterian church of Middletown got its start on April 6, 1819. On this day, a petition was presented and accepted at the Miami Presbyterian meeting, which was being held in Lebanon, Ohio, forming the church. Reverend Francis Monfort of Carlisle was then appointed to preach one Sunday a month in Middletown. In 1832, the first church building was constructed. The site of this church is now home to the Bethlehem Lutheran Church. In 1856, a new church was constructed and was located at what is present-day 71 South Main Street. Then, in 1891, that church was torn down and construction of a newer, larger church on the same site was completed in 1893. The bricks of the old church were used to help construct the Oakland Presbyterian Church of Middletown. In 1952, the church moved to its current location of 2910 Central Avenue, and the church at 71 South Main Street was torn down. 2910 Central Avenue was dedicated in 1953. In 2019, the First Presbyterian Church celebrated its bicentennial. Finally, we wrap things up with the Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church. To accommodate Middletown's thriving Greek population, the Saints Constantine and Helen Orthodox Church was chartered on March 28, 1931. Previously, services had been held in the homes of members. The property at that 1215 First Avenue was purchased and used for services. In 1957, construction on a new church located at 2500 Grand Avenue began and was completed 2 years later in 1959. This is the present-day home of the congregation. In November of 1970, the 2500 Grand Avenue Church was consecrated by Archbishop Iakovos, primate of the Greek Orthodox Church of North and South America. In 1968, the church sponsored the Greek Bazaar Festival, the first of what is now known as Greek Fest. That is all for today. See you next time. Make sure to check out our other videos.